It's Just Business with Steve Thomas and your host, Chris Larry.
Hello and welcome to another edition of It's Just Business on the Hogside Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media business industrial complex in the, wood chipper existence that it lives within. Steve, how you doing today?
The wood chipper existence, constantly churning, constantly spitting out little bits of garbage. Is that what you mean by that?
Yes, although you could, there's also could be wood chips to line your path, to line your path, right? So
it depends on. I like to be a pessimist. It's fun to be pessimistic, so I like that. No, everything's all's well. I will have another concert report when I have when our next show comes, Chris. This one is going to be Bryan Adams.
Cuts like a knife.
Exactly. Yeah, and I will be headed to Las Vegas to see this. A friend of mine is out there. And so I'm going out there to see Bryan Adams. So it's one of these guys. He's been around forever. So can he really sing anymore? He wasn't exactly, Lou Gramm in the first place, in terms of vocal ability. So we'll see.
It's funny you say Lou Gramm, a Foreigner, because I think I got those two cassettes for my birthday in the same year. He'll probably be fine. I mean, his songs weren't a huge range, right? So if he just belts out Summer of '69, everybody's happy.
Yeah. And it's really just me going out to see my friend more than, I wouldn't normally fly out to go see Bryan Adams, but it's kind of an excuse. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, it sounds fun. Have you already ordered your Sin City hazmat suit?
Well, I think I'm going to wear my Let's Go Brandon t-shirt around. That'll be good to start with.
I actually think you probably that'll get a warm reception there by most. I
don't really gamble. So I'm not opposed to it, but it just doesn't really interest me that much. So, I probably won't spend any time doing that.
Well, when will you be going? What next weekend?
Yeah, it'll be next weekend. Yeah.
During the bye, because you got a gap. Yeah, you got a gap. You could have at least gone and bet a little football.
Yeah, but again, I don't like betting sports either. I don't know. It's just not like I could sit around. If I could sit around and play poker for 3 hours, I would. But it'd have to be free, because I'm just not. I don't really want to gamble. I have real money, Like I'm good enough in blackjack, and I can sort of keep it going, for a while. But I don't like to risk money. I'm very, very cheap, Chris.
See, I have a strategy. I just call it the excitement of low expectations. So I just bet small amounts, but just get just as excited or depressed when I lose it. So, $10 or $15, I'm sitting there, like chewing my fingers off because I enjoy the activity. But, ultimately there's very low stakes.
Yeah, I'm not willing to do anything but very low stakes. I haven't been to Vegas in a long time, like more than a decade. When I was there before, it was I was in the expensive part of the strip because his clients wanted us to be there at Caesar's Palace, and there weren't tables for less than like $50 a hand. It was outrageously expensive, and that I'm just not willing to do that,
Well, good luck with that. It should be fun. I was there about this time last year, so it is nice. Well, you don't care about the warmer, but it will be warmer.
Yeah, there's nothing warmer than where I am now. So
yeah. So that won't be a draw.
Matter of fact, that part's going to bum me out because it'll probably be colder. I won't be able to wear shorts in early February.
You'd probably be fine. All right. So what would our show kickoff be, Steve, without a look at the Washington Commanders sale and the twists and turns, ups and downs, the intrigue, the gossip, and the big gossip, and that's really how you think you qualify it, especially considering the source of the reporting, is that Bezos has re-entered the battlefield and the battle royale for ownership, and apparently a hang-up, or the reporting in the New York Post was that he's got to arrange sale of the Washington Post, and somehow in order to buy the team or to get in, those things are somehow linked. I think the whole thing is BS, quite frankly, and just a kind of like page 6, to reference another New York Post thing, page 6 gossip style reporting on something that nobody really knows what's going on unless you're, involved at Bank of America.
Yeah, I didn't buy any of it either. First of all, the idea that Jeff Bezos would kowtow to Dan Snyder by selling the Washington Post to buy a football team, I don't buy it. There's no real evidence of it. Like you said, it's all a bunch of rumors. I don't think Jeff Bezos would do that. And furthermore, I don't know why this doesn't come up more, but I think Jeff Bezos has a business conflict of interest anyway. I don't know how you can have the same guy own the company that has a major media contract with the NFL and then have him purchase a team. I mean, I'm not saying it's against the law. Don't, when I say conflict of interest, I think it's a business conflict, and I think the NFL would be wise to stay away from it. That part, I just don't think it's a good idea. So there's that. But yeah, I don't buy any of this. It's not to say Bezos couldn't swoop in at the end. Well, first of all, let me back up. I'm still not 100% convinced he's actually going to sell this team. He's never said he is selling it. And the whole Bank of America as sale broker thing was a media report, but Dan Snyder's not confirmed he's selling, and he's not said anything. So I'm still not 100% certain it's going to happen in the first place. But assuming it is, these brokers for these sales, they'll ask for bids, like a first round of bids, and then they'll try to drive the price up by having a second round. But that's not to say Bezos couldn't swoop in at the end and offer more, and they wouldn't take it. So I think it's could happen, but I don't think it could happen. But I'm not buying these reports, and I definitely don't think he'll sell the Washington Post just because of it.
Yeah, I agree with all that. Basically, I think, well, one, that initial opening round of bids is to set the floor, right? So,
Right.
of course, the Bezoses of the world wait and see, and that's just so that they see the game board better, right? Let the long shots throw their name, hat in the ring, and then you start to see what kind of financial range we're talking about here. So, it. And I always figured we'd still get the reverberations of his interest. Also, everybody involved has mutual interest in Bezos being involved, even if it is rumors, right? Even if it is ghosts and myths and false starts, because all that does is help to generate excitement, possibly spook the bidders to go higher, et cetera, et cetera. Even when the initial, at least the reporting on the initial portfolio came out, and it was like slightly smaller than people thought. Still, it might be, the floor seems to be about $2 billion more than the Broncos, which was 6 months ago, by the way, or a year ago. But anyway, it was a little disappointing. And they said Bezos's non-interest is kind of flatlined it. So guess what? We see stories about Bezos's interest, floated to friendly outlets and gossip mongers. So, that to me, this is just negotiating through the press at obviously a bazillion dollar level. To your point, I totally agree that the conflict of interest way more lies in the Amazon's relationship as a broadcast partner of the NFL. I personally don't like when teams own media outlets, but we see it, especially in baseball, but in other sports, that's happening. It's happened. It is currently happening. I think that is way less of an issue and much more of a regional or a local issue than it is, a $9 billion partner and what that is. I think some people might look at, oh, he already is richer than all of us. He's got a major contract, so we're beholden to him. Now he's the owner and he owns the local media. But I think the local media is always the last bullet point on anybody's list of concerns out of that menu.
Yeah, yeah. But this is like a next level conflict, though. It's one thing to own like Dan Snyder owned, Red Zebra, which was the local, what was it, 980, local radio station. That's one thing. But when you're talking about one, he owns probably the second most prominent newspaper in the country, in the Washington Post, which, by the way, has written tons of articles, stories opposed to the best interests of the team. And then the Amazon thing. So, what happens? I mean, would the Washington team be featured more prominently on Thursday night or less prominently? I mean, I just think it's a problem. It's just a problem generally. And The NFL, if I were the NFL, I would rule him out and just say we're not
Also,
going to approve it.
the other owners are going to want in too. Like, oh, you mean we can sell our services back to
Right.
the NFL and basically like lower our costs across the board? You know, so like
Yeah, exactly.
Bezos would just be putting money back into his pocket that
Because
he
there's other
dumped
ones
in.
that could afford that. Like that. Stan Kroenke could do it. He's the AEG. That's a huge nationwide promoter, the second biggest in the country.
Yeah, and maybe they add streaming channels to their potential portfolio so they can line themselves up to do these kinds of deals. It's just like becomes almost like a money laundering thing, right? Paying myself to do the business.
Kind of, yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's not an inapt comparison. I think for those of you who are for some reason rooting for Jeff Bezos, and I've said before, I don't think you should be rooting for him. He's got a bad reputation, inside Amazon, as a guy you don't want to work for. And for those of you who don't realize this, Amazon has a really, really, really high turnover in the corporate headquarters, just like an amazingly high turnover. And the reason is it's a very difficult place to work. And so, do you really want all that in Washington? Um, so I don't know. And I don't like Jay-Z's involvement. I he's got a background I don't like, and I don't know. So that whole thing, I would, if somebody's going to buy the team, I'd rather it be someone two people less prominent. I think what Washington needs is to stay out of the limelight for a while and just focus on football. And the way to do that is not to bring the owner of Amazon and a famous rapper in as your buyers. Who by the way owns, the Thursday Night Football. You just want some random businessman to come in and go, I'm going to win, and leave it at that. That's what I would root for if I was a Washington fan.
Just a regular dyed-in-the-wool, normal, lame billionaire owner.
Yeah, basically.
Faceless, nameless.
Faceless,
Yeah.
nameless, anonymous, multi-billionaire.
The other thing about Bezos that a few people have picked up on is, the Seattle Seahawks are going to be on the market very soon. And if and I know Bezos has legitimate ties to DC, and obviously there's a lot of value in being in DC, and he's, there's Amazon headquarters, all kinds of things. So, it's almost it is a second home to him. But you could imagine if he knows the Seattle Seahawks are coming soon, that might have more appeal on a number of levels, and is the original and still, I think, main corporate home of Amazon. So there's also those kind of things. So it's not even Commanders or nothing necessarily, and ones that would be relevant to him.
No, but again, and there's the same conflict of interest problem, with Seattle.
I'm just saying why he might sit out the Washington.
Yeah, that's fair. And in terms of other names, I don't know. I mean, again, there's nothing really concrete. There's rumors of guys in and out, and who knows. And the kind of the one buried under the wool a little bit is Byron Allen. Nobody seems to be talking about him, but the NFL's tried to get him to buy a team for years. So there's a bunch of names. So we'll just have to wait and see if it happens, and if so,
they're
when.
all rumors until there's a deal. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's like free agency on steroids. You can't believe anything really. It's all negotiation through the press.
Yeah. So I mean, that's it. There's no real news. We just wanted to address the Jeff Bezos rumors.
So, speaking of selling of sports franchises, this is our second show that we've talked about something that's going on with a baseball team in its sale. In terms of this time, we're talking about Artie Moreno, the owner of the California. What are they? California Angels?
Los Angeles. I think it's the Los Angeles Angels.
Okay, the Anaheim Angels is probably the more accurate. Los Angeles Angels. We're up for sale. We're selling a team, and this past week, we're suddenly not selling the team, and it's because we have quote unquote unfinished business. And basically, he's referring to no championships with a high payroll, and kind of sort of missed expectations and a little bit of mistrust with the fan base. All legitimate, all true, all have absolutely nothing to do with why he's now not selling the team.
Yeah, it's just a great quote. So we found this in. There's a lot of stories on this, but I'm looking at it, it's Front Office Sports by AJ Perez, dated January 23rd, 2023. Artie Moreno takes Angels off the market. Said it has unfinished business. So the quote is funny. During this process, this is Moreno's statement. During this process, it became clear that we have unfinished business, and we feel we can make a positive impact on the future of the team and the fan experience. That's it. He's being altruistic, folks, and he's trying to make a difference. And by this whole statement, what he means is that he did not get offered as much money as he wanted to for the sale of the team. By the unfinished business is he wants to drive the value of the team up further so he can make more money. That is the unfinished business. So this goes on. He bought the team for 183.5 million in 2003. The most recent Forbes valuation was 2.2 billion, which incidentally, for those of you keeping track, is approximately 4 billion less than what the bidding is for the Washington football team.
Right, the floor bidding.
Yeah, the floor bids, right. And I think if you and I think I said 6, and you had a little higher than me.
I think it'll be it might still be 6, it'd be closer to 7.
Yeah, right. So anyway, now what's interesting in here is I wasn't aware of. This says Moreno's $320 million deal to purchase Angel Stadium and the surrounding parking lot from the city of Anaheim fell apart amid a federal investigation. And then in a stroke of reporting genius, they just let it go and didn't in any way describe. Yeah, no description of what the federal investigation is at all. So it makes me wonder, what that's all about. I have no idea. But the big picture here is this. We talked about the Nationals last week. The Nationals are having trouble selling. Why? Well, in part because they are in the value has been driven down because of the mess of the media contracts. Now we have a second Major League Baseball team that also can't sell because the owner can't get enough money. So does this say anything about the valuation of Major League Baseball franchises?
I think it's hard not to draw conclusions, right? Now, if you're knowledgeable about these situations and you kind of triple, quadruple click down, they have their own individual stories, right? We talked last show about the Masson, Orioles, Nationals, brouhaha. So, and that being a sticking point of that sale. Obviously, we don't know a lot about it in terms of you kind of caught us late, but whatever's happening with the stadium sounds like that's also a bit kind of caught in the mud and probably has some implications on sale value, etc. So there are individual circumstances that do make sense or do tell a broader story. I think even with those factors in place, they still speak to the fact that these teams are not getting on the open market the value that these owners and probably the league, right? Because the league and Rob Manfred has sort of inserted themselves in both of these in various ways, trying to be seen as a alleviator of these roadblocks. Like, how do they bring the bulldozer in and get these roadblocks out of the way? It seems to be baseball's role, because it obviously has a lot of riding on the value of these teams. So I think it's obvious everyone's concerned about this, and I think it's obvious that there aren't as many people interested in owning baseball teams. And it's fascinating, and I wonder, there could be so many factors, but right now it looks like $2 billion is, probably what it costs, and that seems like very undervalued, at least from MLB's perspective.
Yeah, but let's take a basic comparison. So the National Football League as a whole is making more than twice or even 3 times what, in terms of league-wide revenue, than what baseball is making. So if you take that at like a really basic level, the idea that the Angels are valued, currently the sale of the Angels price is about, 3 times less than the sale of the alleged sale price of the Washington football team. It's not really too far off, But so I found, while Chris, you were talking, we didn't research this ahead of time, so I'm reading this on the fly. I should have, but we didn't. This is from voiceofoc.org. I don't know how legit they are, but that's what this is from. Spencer Custodio and Hosmer E. Latter from May of 2022, so last year. Anaheim City Council members have decided to cancel Angel Stadium land sale following an FBI corruption probe into former mayor Harry Seidhu, who abruptly resigned last week, meaning last May. City council members unanimously voted to kill all proceedings surrounding the stadium deal after over 2 hours of public comments where residents spoke up against the deal. Um, Apparently, the FBI is investigating this, according to this column here. So it looks like this all stems back from something to do with the mayor. So who knows what that's all about? The former mayor. So there you go. So it's something to do with that. Um, so we'll see. But point is, I don't know if 2 billion is too far off. Really.
Well, I think that's what a sort of cold-eyed, practical market speaks. Guesstimation is probably right around in there. I just don't think these
They might
people
not
selling
like
it want to
it.
accept it. Yeah.
But that's and really that's I mean, it's only 100% less than the Denver Broncos sale, because that went for what, 4.5 billion. And so you could maybe argue from that really basic comparison sake that this Angels price is overvalued. I mean, point is, I don't think it's so far out of the realm of this. So this may just be, it's either one, Artie Moreno altruistically wants to assist, and make lives better for the, people who are following the team, which, nobody should believe that, or he's got an inflated sense of self-worth in terms of his valuation of his own team. It's one of those two things. I'm going with the latter.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt. I mean, those factors and motivations that they put into that end goal might be, kind of a mixed bag, or we might be just guessing on. But like, I think that is ultimately the goal: is right. It is not advantageous for us to sell this right now. There's probably some things we can do, and we can afford to wait it out. Let's see if conditions change. And they have a stacked roster. They probably have two of the top 5 players in baseball, especially from a saleability kind of standpoint. So I mean, it's not crazy that they just actually go out and have string a season or two together, and just in terms of being competitive and having superstars, even that drives value up.
It depends on your buyer, though. Some buyers aren't really baseball fans or sports fans. It's if they're looking at it solely from a financial perspective. Sometimes teams that are sold strip down their roster in order to hand over kind of a blank slate and low debt. And in the case of the Angels, Mike Trout, and you're talking about Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani, both of whom are making enormous money, and they had a top 10 payroll. They had $179 million payroll. That's for every buyer. That's not necessarily a good thing. I mean, again, some of these buyers don't care about winning. They care about money.
There was an interesting tidbit in this article about Moreno that I agree with you completely. I don't, but what's Moreno's personal experience, and how does that sort of shape his worldview here? Because he actually purchased at probably too expensive, which is part of the problem. He probably overpaid in, what was it,
2003.
2003, the year after they won the World Series. So he bought a bloated asset based on field success, probably feels a little ripped off. So, because like you're talking about, so that's 20-year difference, and you're talking about 183 million. I guess that is actually pretty good markup. But he bought after a championship bubble. So to me, and the reporter got that little tidbit in here, which means he's obviously, reporters hearing things where there's a little bit like, well, maybe, like I got scammed, be excited to buy a good asset, right? So what's his experience rather than others?
It's still a more than 1,000% markup.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
It's a lot. So I don't know. It's possibly feels that way. I mean, look, maybe Artie Moreno is kind of a strange guy in
Yeah.
terms of the way he's handled the Angels over the years and stuff. Maybe it is true. Maybe he just can't bear to not win a World Series. Who knows? Personally, I'm not buying it in any way. What I've wondered, Chris, is there are 2 other Major League Baseball teams within, what, 30, 40 miles of each other, the Dodgers and the Padres. I think by anybody's estimation, the Dodgers have the highest valuation of those 3 teams. I would assume their media contract is ridiculous, But I wonder if the value of that team is depressed by the fact that their local media market is carved up.
I think 100%, and that actually is a comp to Washington. So actually very similar situations in terms of like now they don't have necessarily those contractual, snafus like we've talked about with Orioles, Masson, and the Nationals. But you're still the reason you have that problem is because you have two teams in a very close media market. So I think those factors I think are big. And then I know that California is big, but you also have the San Francisco Giants, which California's also a lot of people moving around and have been the most successful of any of the California teams over the last 10,
And the
15
Oakland
years.
A's too.
Yeah, and the Oakland A's, right? Exactly. So there's a lot of saturation at the state level and obviously at the hyper regional level. So I think that's totally valid. Also, they're an afterthought. We joked about them playing in Anaheim and stuff. They're not centered. People, if LA is not really like a city like we think of, especially East Coast cities or other things. So there's string of cities, of exurbs, of suburbs, or regions. Really, it's a region. So it's not. Anaheim is not downtown LA. It's much different.
Yeah, I lived there as a kid. I lived in the LA area. My dad was a military officer, and we lived on one of the local military bases there. Um, so, like you said, Anaheim is not Los Angeles. Now, don't forget, it's an interesting marketing strategy here. I forget when this happened, but they used to be for those of you who are too young to remember, they used to be the Anaheim Angels, and they changed their name to Los Angeles against the wishes of the Dodgers, I might add.
And weren't
Um,
they California Angels in there for some
yes, they
stretch
were.
too?
They were the
Yeah.
California Angels dating back to like the early '80s. And that got changed from a marketing perspective. It's California is such a huge state. It's you don't really have a local tie when you're like this. So it then changed to Anaheim, and the reason why they dumped Anaheim is what Chris is saying. LA, for those of you who don't know, LA really isn't just a city with a tiny downtown. It is a massively spread out, multiple with multiple different regions in it, and Anaheim is just one of them. Anaheim is south of downtown LA proper, and it is known as kind of its own little separate area. So by calling themselves the Anaheim Angels, they were getting kind of pigeonholed into the OC crowd basically as being their fan base. And so changing it to LA, they're trying to expand their marketing to the entire region. But they've always played second fiddle to the Dodgers in LA. I'm not just talking as I'm a Dodger fan, full disclosure, but from a marketing standpoint, the Dodgers have always been LA and have always been the region's team. The Angels have always been kind of second place. They're kind of like the Clippers to the Lakers in terms of how people have viewed the teams there, sort of second fiddle. So them constantly changing their name is their way of sort of improving their marketing. But I don't. It's never really worked. They're not the prominent team in LA. And newsflash, the Padres, which are the San Diego Padres, but the Padres have a bigger fan base too. So I would argue they're probably third in Southern California, even
Yeah,
with
plus they've got
Shohei
the
Ohtani.
rivalry. And they have the rivalry, right? So you also have the Dodgers v Padres as a
Yeah,
real so it's just supercharged and that's so if you're a fan of either team or you're even just involved in their rivalry is a much different thing than this random American League team kind of over in your neighbor's backyard.
yeah. Whereas if you put put the Angels in another city that in which they're the only team and they have a more diehard fan base. And here's the other thing: um, LA isn't known as a great sports town. Again, if most of you are probably on the East Coast listening to this, LA is not a great sports town. And by which I mean there's a lot of distractions in LA and there's a lot of things to do and a lot of people from other areas and a lot of a lot of people are into entertainment, not sports. There's beaches, all kinds of things. So they don't have a passionate diehard fan base really except the Dodgers at this point. Even the
And the
Lakers.
Lakers. Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
but the Lakers nowadays have been a little less, but certainly the Dodgers and the Lakers. But the rest of them, not great. The LA Rams had trouble filling the stadium. The Chargers looked like a soccer game, for a couple years. So I think it's almost maybe depressed valuation because of that too.
yeah. Also, just it's not convenient, right? These things aren't downtown. I mean,
LA's huge. You can drive 60 miles and still be in the LA city limits. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so even Northern California is different, and there's in terms of some of that, like it's maybe this bigger region, but there's more affiliation and people are more. It's easier to drive a whole bunch of things, even make it different within its own state. But totally agree. So it's super fascinating. We'll see. There's something going on with the valuation of baseball teams that the league and the individual owners are not super happy with, I think is a fair statement to make. Well, we love checking in on a sport that neither of us really care about, but that's golf. But it's a fascinating business story, and we've talked about Live Golf a ton. But there is some news in that they have gotten their TV deal, because we've always talked about they don't have a TV deal. So how real can it be, or who's even watching? What's their business model? All those things. But they do. The CW has now gotten a U.S. broadcasting right to put on Live Golf events.
Okay. ESPN has a story. Live Golf secures TV streaming deal with the CW network. This is Mark Schlabach, January 19th. So if a couple days ago. So yeah, CW is the network. And what's interesting about this is a revenue sharing thing. They're not just paying rights fees to this, meaning like CW isn't just handing them a check and hoping for the best. This is what they mean by revenue sharing is the amount of revenue that will be generated by the broadcast on the streaming platform and on the network will be shared between the network and Live Golf. What this means is that CW is not wholly confident about how well it would do and was not willing to basically give a guarantee to Live Golf. And it's a smart thing to do from the CW perspective, I think, because Live Golf, for those of you who don't remember, Live Golf is owned by a company that's controlled by a bunch of Saudi oil sheiks, and so there's a human rights aspect to it that they've been criticized for. And the other thing that's interesting is that it's the fact that it's the CW in the first place. CW, to my knowledge, has never broadcast sports. I think this column says this. And they're kind of dipping their toe in it, and of course, the reason why they're on CW is because no other network wanted to offer them a deal, or at least a deal that was as good. And so this is sort of a new step for both. But I think the part the revenue sharing part is very interesting, and I'm not aware of another major sport that has this kind of deal.
Well, it's not dissimilar to the NHL's deal with the Outdoor Network and NBC when they came off their strike or their whatever lockout year. So they had to basically have a similar type deal just to get, give away the farm just to get back on TV. And that strategy played out well for the NHL over time. I mean, it was a long game, and they factored the patience to do it. But it worked out for them, and they got better deals, going forward when those came up. But they just needed to get a toehold again. So I think it's probably similar to that. But here's where, these things, you start to look at the non-sports context of these things. So apparently a company called Nexstar, some media acquisition company, bought the CW in 2022. So I'm looking actually at an article from the Onion AV Club, which is not like the Onion that it's the same company, but it's a real media and entertainment site.
The Onion is a satirical media site thing out of Harvard.
Right. So the AV Club is actually a real thing that covers media. But November 29th, 2022, that this Nexstar has purchased the network. And here's the tidbit. CW, if you probably know, is known for like teen soaps and silly superhero shows and just kind of like a younger demographic, but actually some hit shows and they had a niche. So Nexstar purchased it, but the fans of the CW will not love this move. The CW's new parent company has indicated its plans, here we go, to target an older demographic and signals as much canceling many of the network's existing shows and announcing the carryover shows from the previous regime would be minimal. Nexstar has also not extended its partnership with Paramount and Warner Brothers, which could render the C for CBS and the W for Warner's obsolete. So so you can see in their media strategy that they were buying a brand, and this Nexstar was buying a brand and a distribution channel, and said pretty much right away, we're changing the point of this. And what says older demographic faster than going and getting a golf contract? So
Which is the oldest sport in the world.
Yeah. So you really see, so how do we, doesn't sound like it's going to be a gradual thing. This was a cut the cord, cancel the shows, get new, different programming immediately.
No more shows about teens with daddy issues.
Right. Exactly. And we're gonna put their daddies on TV and cater to their daddies. So really fascinating to see what this means for CW, and it looks like they got a sweetheart deal. So their movement.
Yeah, because the other part of the sweetheart deal I should have mentioned before is Live Golf is paying the production costs. So basically, CW said, "We'll broadcast if you hand it to us. We'll broadcast, but we're not going to pay you any rights fees. We're not going to pay you any of your costs. Whatever money we make, we'll give you a percentage of it." It's basically Live Golf is taking 100% of the risk. And what this shows, I think, is that. Because we questioned, you and I had no questions. I think you did. I questioned whether Live Golf, the owners of Live Golf, really want to make any money with this, or this just a bunch of old sheiks wanting to get famous people to hang around them. This shows that at a bare minimum, they're at least trying to make some money, at it. And there may be we want to hang around famous people a part of this, for sure. But they do want to make money. They haven't reduce any of their production costs, and by which I mean they've given they got all these golfers to go to Live Golf because they're paying them just a truckload of money, a huge money.
The purses are nuts, and they're crazy. Guaranteed,
and they're flying them around in private jets and stuff like that the tour is paying for. And so this might be no more than just we want to offset. It could be just we want to offset some of our costs by finding a broadcast network, because they think there's a group of people. There's multiple sides to the spectrum. Okay, there's a group of people who care a lot about the human rights aspect of it and go and think I'm never going to watch something put on by a bunch of women abusing and LBTGQFML, whatever that acronym is, abusing, human rights people. I respect that. There's another group of people say, I couldn't care less. I just want to watch golf. I want to watch my favorite golfers. And then there's the group in the middle that probably cares something about both. And some of that's not really present in other leagues. And so I don't know if this is like the first tiptoe into making Live Golf the prominent, golf golf league in the world, or if this is just them offsetting costs.
Yeah, and I think that kind of we're not touching it full on move by the CW's part probably is somewhat motivated to some shielding of backlash that they know they're going to get. Well, hey, we're just we're not really involved with them. It's so it's like, look at how flimsy this deal is maybe partly self-defense. I don't think that was the prime motivator, but I think they're probably seeing it as a nice kind of exhaust from the deal to help give them a slice of, and they've already taken some heat. There's already obviously been some criticism that CW would do this. So, but I'm sure, they planned, that was all part of the calculus. Don't kid yourself. So super fascinating.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but by part of the calculus, this means that the CW Nexstar is smart enough to place the valuation of the deal, to take that into account when they value the deal and say,
yes,
look, we're going to take heat for this, so you need to take less money because we are going to take heat from dealing with a bunch of prejudiced Saudi oil sheiks.
Yeah, totally. So I think it obviously means that Live Golf would eventually like to have a business model, and it's a step towards that. But I think it's less about, whatever version of revenue this generates, even in a somewhat, if they kind of got better deals over time, if it performs well. But it also is, they just need legitimacy, right? Because, they need somewhere. We've talked about, and when we talk about it, about 1/75th of the time that the golf world talks about this, and how much it's shaking it up. But all this energy, all this activity, all these top talent, all this, and you actually can't watch it. So they couldn't go on. They couldn't have 2 years of talk and you actually not be able to see this, especially with that talent. So they needed legitimacy of just being able to say, oh, I can watch live golf at this date.
Well, yeah. Not only could you not watch it, it was barely even reported on.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly, I don't remember seeing more than a handful of stories about a live golf tournament. Like,
It's
what
report the
is?
controversy, not the sport.
Yeah, I mean, like, what is Phil Mickelson and Rory McIlroy? What are they doing? You know, are they playing well? What I'd really be interested to see. We didn't really look this up for today, and we'll talk about it some other time. When we get back to ratings, I'd really like to see what happened to the PGA Tour ratings this past year. Because like neither one of us are big golf fans. I mean, I would watch like if it came down to the Sunday of the Masters and I was bored and like Tiger was doing well and there was some interesting. I'll watch some of it, but I was never like a big like I'm going to watch every tournament thing. I'm really curious now that 75% of their talent, just top talent, just left. What were the ratings like in the PGA this year? I don't know the answer to that. And like,
No.
well, we haven't looked at it, and so I'd really be interested to see um, how the ratings are for this. Like, what draw really is Phil Mickelson? Or is Phil Mickelson just the beneficiary of people like golf, and he was on, and they watched him, and he won, and so he became popular. So that part is fascinating to me.
It'll be a good year to test that. It'd be good to sort of sit at the end of this golf season or whatever, because one, you'll have live golf on TV with the CW deal. You'll have whatever, so you have ratings there. You have ratings for the, whatever traditional PGA events. So you have the direct compare and contrast, but you'll also get the Masters, which can invite anyone. So you'll get a tournament that's got, you'll have a tournament that's got all the talent in one tournament because the Masters are going to cut themselves off. That's why they leverage their independence. So you'll actually get like the sort of ratings for one of each, and then a ratings of a combined tournament to compare.
Yeah. Now the live golf season begins. See, the ESPN article says it's scheduled to tee off. Great pun. February 24th in Mexico, and then there are 14 tournaments. And the full schedule has not been announced yet. But point is, it's going to overlap. Now, we don't know how many of these tournaments are in the United States. So we'll see. But either way, there will be competing golf on this year at some point. It may not be, U.S. Open weekend. I don't know. We'll see. But we will get a good sense of where things are going because I would love to, I think you first proposed. So are we headed towards the AFC, NFC of golf?
Yeah.
If the only way that happens is if Live Golf makes a big takes a significant amount of the golf ratings away.
We will see. So obviously we'll be watching that story. We finish off with a.
No, just before you move on, would it bother you personally to watch this golf tournament knowing who owns it? It would bother me a little bit. I don't know if I would not watch, but it would be in the back of my head that I don't know how much I want to support this entity, this outfit. So
that's a great question. So I'd say one, I conveniently get to not care because I don't like golf, right? So I can stake a moral high ground pretty easily. Yeah. I will not watch live golf.
And I'm not a huge golf fan either, so that's same with me kind of. I'm probably more than you, but not much.
So I can hide behind that. I'd say let's say it was hockey. Then I'd have to really sit down and think about it. I probably, and whether this is my own internal rationalization or not, I probably would still watch because, the reality is I interact in a world with tons of things that, I personally don't agree with at various levels. And it's sort of like, and once you start to pick and choose, it's kind of a slippery slope.
Yeah.
So that would probably be the rationalization path that I would have to still watching, but it's a flashpoint one, right? It really is like it's pretty stark. It's pretty stark and it would be tough. I probably would still watch with that rationalization, I think.
Yeah, I would too, but I don't know if I'd want to fly out to go pay money to go to a tournament and support at that level. I don't know if I would.
Right, and you're supporting anything no matter how you engage with it. But there also is degrees, right? Like, I haven't purchased a thing that, well, Dan Snyder is offered in any form for a long time. And then my brother was like, when we were arguing about it, he's like, well, you get the Sunday ticket, that benefits him, and not even indirectly, right? It's all into the communist coffers. So I'm like, well, that's, fair point.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if I'd be most interested to see if anybody watches this CW broadcast.
I think, well, and you got to be hesitant to overreact to the early numbers because
Yeah.
there'll be a car wreck curiosity factor. So you really have to. The reality is second, third tournament ratings.
Well, yeah, that, and also there's going to be a group of people who aren't even aware it's on the CW.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
because seriously, because the CW is like the teen drama network.
yeah.
And like I can't remember the last time I turned the CW on. I mean, that's not, you and I are not in that space,
No,
So how many people are going to even realize that it's on in the first place? So there'll be a combination of car wreck factor and a combination of just getting people to realize it's even on.
we'll have to look into who Nexstar is because it seems like an odd move to buy something and completely strip it of its brands. CW must have some media rights and broadcast that makes that look good for them, because to buy it and completely change everything, including its name and its audience and what it produces, means there's got to be underlying reasons why they purchased it.
Either that or they're just really dumb.
Yeah, exactly, which I doubt, but could be. Um, so last story we have is actually super interesting. It is a fight between the Dolans, the owner of the Knicks, Rangers, Madison Square Garden, Radio City Music Hall, and a couple other MSG Presents properties in New York City, and New York's AG Tish James. And they're fighting about the validity. Well, two things really: the use of facial recognition, which is a whole interesting topic in and of itself. And then this becomes a super interesting manifestation of these issues in terms of how it's used, and then the validity of its use in terms of how a business can turn away customers. Basically, a lot of the critique of facial recognition, and especially linked with AI, is that it can obviously be super biased, and there's all kinds of stuff around, what kind of faces, whose faces, what are we looking for. And if this was a story about them, trying to siphon out ne'er-do-wells to enter the stadium, it would be that story. So while we're talking the same story with facial recognition and personal freedom and a lot of issues that it really is a big issue in our society with the software and technology, but this one is to actually weed out legal rivals or the representations of legal rivals from the stadium and other venues owned by Madison Square Garden. So this one is a highly acute, specific application of the facial recognition technology outside of the sort of normal cautionary tales. And I actually think pretty scary on its own way. Steve?
Yeah, I agree. So this story is in multiple places, but where we came across it was CNBC. New York AG Letitia James presses MSG over use of facial recognition technology by Noah Scheidlower on January 26th. And so, so what has happened here is that MSG, the Madison Square Garden, has put in place very, very, very advanced facial recognition software. So what has happened is, as attorneys have entered the building to attend events, they've purchased tickets. The facial recognition software has automatically picked them out of the crowd of thousands, and then they send a goon squad out to accost this person in the hallway and tell them you got to go. And one of the stories cited is, for example, a woman is there with like the Girl Scout, her daughter's Girl Scout team, and they were going to watch, I forget,
Ice
whatever,
Capades or something like that.
something
Or,
like
no,
that. Yeah,
the Radio City Christmas
the
Spectacular.
Rockettes. Yeah, there you go. They were there to watch the Rockettes, and they kicked the woman out. And so now this group of girls is now without one of their adult chaperones, watching this event. So attorneys, having done this, attorneys sometimes have to investigate. Sometimes have to go do site visits for if there's a site involved in a lawsuit, like a personal injury lawsuit or something. You will set up an inspection of the site, and all the opposing councils are there, the owners there, and then there's a protocol and everything. So my guess is that Madison Square Garden is, James Dolan, who's one of the pettiest human beings ever to walk the earth, by the way, is probably, if you had to ask him, he's probably saying they're trying to prevent a free look here. But if this doesn't scare you, I don't know what could possibly scare you. Okay, Chris and I are on dramatically opposite sides of the political spectrum, and we are both horrified by this, because this is software. This is not like a crowd of five with a dude like looking at a camera. This is very advanced software doing it for them, where they have data plugged into a system, and the system is smart enough to pick individuals out of a crowd, where they've got a goon squad right on tap where they go find this person. That is scary. That is very scary. Now, it's private property. Private property owners do have the right to exclude people from their business within certain constitutional limits. But this is, one, next level petty, and two, next level frightening. And I think everybody ought to be horrified by this.
I 100% agree. And so, I know we have obviously a big Washington fan base, so that's, the Hogstye, yada, yada. So and because this is a complete comparable, because whenever you talk about the worst professional sports owners for U.S., let's keep it U.S. based, U.S. sports owners, the Dolans are really, what's his name? Jerry?
James.
James. So James Dolan and Dan Snyder are on anybody's top 3 list, and usually 1, 2, depending on maybe your point of view. You could swap them out. Who cares? So imagine Dan Snyder deploying this technology for people who had worn anti-Snyder shirts at the previous game. You can, so the same pettiness, right? The same mentality of overreach, the same incompetence, and the same, criminal adjacent activities all apply to both of these owners. So just imagine this technology deployed by Snyder with the Washington Commanders, and it gives you a localized version of what's going on here. And this is so political. I mean, it's almost so blatant, it becomes a perfect example about the overreach of this technology. And so, by the way, you think, oh, well, this is just the set of lawyers, or they're in these legal battles. Well,
that's just the beginning.
Right. The truth of the matter is, Steve aside, but majority of people have opted to put their face into these databases, right? I laugh, and I've done it too. So, and I use these things too. So I'm self-aware, but I always laugh whenever this new thing on social media comes up with all these like AI, change your face, make your face a superhero, make your face a fairy princess, because it's like, people, you're feeding the database at these facial recognition. So and then all the legal safety things that sort of in a 20th century legal context are there to protect you are kind of irrelevant in this 21st century context, just because it's difficult to go from analog to digital. But what's even harder? When everyone opts in. You have no, so when the majority of people are opting into these facial recognition databases, you actually can't hide behind privacy. So, and that's, the ship has sailed on that, folks. And so we've got to front end really, as a society, figure out what we want people doing with this software, and more importantly, with this database of opt-in faces. And that's the scary part.
Yeah, I mean, Chris mentioned me because I'm vehemently against all of this. Even I'm probably in some databases, and I make a big effort to avoid them. But the comparison here is the Chinese government uses technology and is still using this technology in COVID lockdowns. Okay, they are using facial recognition software systems, among other things, to track their people, to impose governmental authoritarian lockdowns on their citizens. This is the same system that Madison Square Garden is using. And today, you may say, who cares about a handful of lawyers or whatever? But number one, again, they separated a mother from her daughter and a bunch of Girl Scouts. Is that okay? Do you think the mother there is like surreptitiously examining the facility? How she's there with the Girl Scout troop. According to their to get info on her lawsuit? I highly doubt it. But that's just today. What happens if it's James Dolan is, like you said, Dan Snyder of New York? Okay, he may be worse. If there's somebody worse, it might be. I might put Dolan over Snyder, honestly. But who? But it doesn't matter. What if it's just somebody Dolan doesn't like? What if he's a
Which is
racist?
basically what this is already.
Yeah, that kind of is. Yeah. But what if he starts excluding people of a certain ethnic background or something? What if he excludes people that have business interests that are opposed to an MSG interest? Yeah, how far does it go? How far does it go? And are there constitution? I mean, this is something beyond the scope of really what I've put a ton of thought into, but what sort of constitutional issues are there here? This is not the government doing this. This is a private party doing this with data that using data that, as Chris said, you have opted into one way or the other. So is there a constitutional privacy thing here? Probably not. Do there need to be federal laws governing the use of facial recognition software like this? I don't know. I mean, it's something to at least consider. Frightening.
It's a very thorn. I mean, it's a very complex issue. The speed of the technology, the capability of the technology, the opt-in nature of the data. These are open. These are public databases, right? That they're scraping, right? So that complexity, just also old school. Where does the
Think about the
government stop and
technology of
start?
this. Because what Madison Gordon is, what, 15, 20,000, seats or something. And so this thing picked one woman or handful of people out of a crowd of up to 15 to 20,000 in, what, seconds, minutes? And minutes later, they had sent a security team out to get them. That is, man, that is scary. Again, this is what the Chinese government is doing right now.
And it's happening many other places than that already too. I mean, I think there's this sort of like, this is the Dolans, so that it's these big stages, whether it's sports or entertainment, in terms of like, whether it's going to, we should mention this, but whether it's going to see a Rangers game or it's going to see the Rockettes at Radio City. I mean, it also speaks to, how much corporate, consolidation, like, here we have the Dolans who are incompetent running running the major arena, two of the major sports teams. This is why you might give him the nod against Snyder, right? He's just wrecking more. It's a volume game, but plus Radio City Music Hall. These are all MSG Presents. So also, when you have this much corporate consolidation of all these sort of things, and then you're applying this ubiquitous technology, so it's like, so this lawyer, let's keep on with the Girl Scout leader lawyer. What, suddenly she can't go to 6 or 7 different places across the city because the corporate consolidation and the tech to guard it is that ubiquitous? We're not just talking about getting kicked out of one arena, right? You're starting to look at what does this corporate entity that's deploying the software, own and operate across the whole urban landscape, and actually it's complicated. It's not easy to solve. It crosses over with a ton of different, but it also, to me, sort of is cross ideology, right? I mean, this is really where, this to me is one of those areas where the left and right should be kind of coming together, and where I think the politicians that represent the left and the right from all sides let them down with big tech because they never ask the right questions, either side. And this is, the sort of like monopoly parts, the speed of this technology, the actually having conversations about, the implications of these technologies before they just go wildfire. There's so many things about big tech that nobody from any ideological thing is actually really pressing the right buttons and asking the right questions. And what we're doing with facial recognition technology is one of the right questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And for James Dolan, for his part of this, the CNBC article does quote his reaction. And of course, it says Dolan on Thursday said he would not back down on a facial recognition fight. Not at all, he told Fox 5's Good Day New York. So he has no problem with it whatsoever. And apparently, the New York State Liquor Authority threatened to take away the liquor license as a result of the use of this. And Dolan, because he's Dolan, predictably gave them the finger too and said, so I have a little surprise for them. They're basically doing this for publicity, so we're going to give them some publicity. What we're going to do, right, is we're going to pick a night, maybe a Rangers game, and we're going to shut down all the liquor and alcohol in the building. This isn't going to bother me because I've been sober for 29 years. I don't need liquor. So it's like, that's, you guys who aren't New York sports fans don't understand the level of pettiness and incompetence of James Dolan. And look, the Knicks. I'm no Knicks fan. The Knicks have had problems for decades, and it's directly tied to him. Who was the guy? He got in a big argument with
Oakley.
yeah, Oakley. Oakley was watching there in the crowd watching a game, and they threw him out for like no reason. And the security guys are hassling him. All this comes down to Dolan.
It was
So
analog facial recognition.
yeah, and so this is the same man that's now tossing lawyers out and separating them from a Girl Scout troop based on a lawsuit. Which, newsflash, the odds of this woman getting any intel that matters, sitting there in the crowd watching the Rockettes, is infinitesimal. Okay, whatever the lawsuit is, nothing's going to come of her just sitting there in like Section 206 watching the Rockettes. It's totally ridiculous, and just be thankful. Here's a question: would you rather have Dan Snyder or James Dolan as the owner of your favorite sports team? This is a real Sophie's choice right here. I got to go with Snyder, probably.
I think that's a good question. I might go with Dolan only because he seems to let sports related people run the sports. He doesn't necessarily pick the right people, but like
Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good counterpoint. But the Knicks had that old Oilers coach ran it for like 20 years and stuff. So at least some of those people get to just sort of. It's almost like what Snyder does with Rivera right now. They're not super effective, but at least they get the chance to win or fail on their own merits. That might be my slight edge, but yes. I mean, this is parsing a sliver.
Yeah, either way, it's what's the least worst option here for sure.
Yes.
So look, here's what I want to say. Those of you who aren't concerned about this, you need to change your perspective, and you need to become concerned about it, and you need to make an effort to guard the privacy of your data, to include your face, but also to include things like credit cards saved on auto pay on websites. Entering your driver's license as identification. I told AT&T the other day I wasn't going to give them my driver's. They wanted to scan my driver's license. No, thank you. There's a lot of things you can do that in the world today put yourself at risk, and people are so used to it that they ignore the problems. And I think everybody ought to be more concerned.
Here. So there you go. Steve, what's the playoff version of the Hogsty?
Well, we are previewing the playoff games as we go. So the show that was released this past Monday, for those of you listening, we will have reviewed the AFC and NFC Championship games. We'll do the Super Bowl. We are not going to do the flag football game that is the whatever the Pro Bowl has turned into. But so we are still doing the show still on Thursday. We're still sort of trying to figure out the off-season schedule, but the show will still. It will either be released on Thursday or Monday in the off season, and we will cover all the latest Washington NFL news. Rick Snyder's season of discontent is on hiatus right now for a while, but he will be back if and when Dan Snyder sells, and if for the draft and all that. And then we have all of our regular written content.
All right, so we here at It's Just Business. We'll see you in 2 weeks.